And the reason you're bound to be miserable is because, and I would say that this is technically true, that almost all the positive emotion that you're going to experience in your life is a consequence of pursuing valuable goals. It's not a consequence of attaining them. It's a consequence of positing them, aiming at them, and then observing yourself moving towards them. And that the sense that accompanies that, and we know the neurobiology of this sense actually quite well, the sense of that is one of forward movement and engagement and meaning and accomplishment. It's something like that. Hope, that's another way of thinking about it. And it's the antidote in some sense to the flip side of life, which is the fact that it's nasty, brutish, and short, as Thomas Hobbes put it. And that's inalienable as well. There's no escape from the limitations and suffering of life. And so, in order for that not to become overwhelming, and then that can easily become overwhelming, and often does in people's lives, then you need a countervailing set of propositions that you can act out and embody to endow that limitation with worth. And that's not a trivial problem. I was just debating, not really, Slavoj Žižek about a week ago, and 2 weeks ago maybe, and I was debating him because he had been advertised to me and many others as sort of the world's foremost Marxist scholar, and it turned out that he really was not much of a Marxist at all. And so I ended up criticizing the Communist Manifesto, which deserves criticism, and then I expected him to defend it, but he didn't, and so that was sort of interesting but nonplussing. But he said something very interesting during that debate, and it came all of a sudden, it came out of the blue, you know, and I think it was the most striking part of the entire discussion. And this is just a strange segue, but I need to discuss this because it struck me so hard and because I think it's such an important point. I'd never thought about it before. So he told me something I'd never thought about before at all. He was talking about the Christian passion. And he said that his sense was that the most important part of it was the scene, let's say, where Christ is crucified and cries out to God that he's been forsaken. And he said, look, got to think about what that means. I'm paraphrasing him. He said that the suffering that characterizes individual human life is so intense that even if God himself deigns to undergo it, it will test his faith to the point where he will not believe in his own existence. And that's really something. And I thought, wow, that's such a brilliant observation, is that, because it's definitely the case, you know, if you interact with people in any manner that's the least bit below the surface, you find out that most people are carrying a relatively heavy existential burden of one form or another. You know, I mean, many people have a physical illness that they're dealing with, or a mental illness that they're dealing with. And if you're in a fortunate position where you're not dealing with either of those, you probably have a family member that does. And if you don't have either of those, you will. That's for sure. And you know, that's just one of many terrible catastrophes that are certain to visit you. And that terrible catastrophe is a challenge to us in many ways. It's a challenge to us because it forces us to look deeply for a countervailing meaning that can make sense out of that, and then maybe more than make sense out of it.